Hold on a second. Okay, Jacob.
Okay, we're ready to go.
You're on. Can you
Okay.
just repeat the 3 things we're going to do today for the recording?
Yep. So the agenda for today, we're going to learn how to make the camera follow along with the ball as it rolls around, and then we're going to learn how to make objects collectible. So you run into them and they disappear, and then maybe we can have a score go up. And then the third thing is we want to learn about sound effects, so we can have a sound effect play when we collect our collectible items. I'm going to go ahead and share my desktop.
Oh wait.
Go ahead.
I was playing around on my game, and I found out that you can jump multiple times in the air, and you can do an infinite jump.
Yeah, depending on how your script is set up. You know, we found a way last week to kind of limit the number of jumps that you can do.
Yeah,
so
I was just playing it, and I could jump as many times as I wanted in the air.
Yeah, we can go back and revisit the way to avoid that at the end if we have time. If not, I will make sure. I know I tried to send an email with the scripts at the end of last week's session, and I got a couple bounce backs, so I might not have had the right email addresses for some of you.
Oh, that might be my fault, Jacob.
Yeah,
Actually got bounced
we
back.
can get that sorted out later.
Okay.
For the time being, we're gonna go ahead and move forward just with the camera for now, and I will make a note, Peter, to get that jump script for you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I will share my desktop, and here we go. Okay, so what I have here is just a simple scene. I have a couple planes for my ground. I sort of have the beginnings of a level here. I put in a couple walls. I don't have all the walls in yet. And then I have this cube here, which is going to be my collectible item. First thing we're going to do today, though, is get our camera working so that the camera follows along with the ball. And I actually have already written a script that will do this. So let's take a look at that script and what it does. Okay, here's the script, and this is a pretty simple script. Okay, I called it player camera. You know, you want to name it something descriptive. In the update function, remember the update function runs once every time step, every frame. I am just changing the position of the camera. So I'm using transform.position, and I use transform.position.y to set the y position, and .z for the z position, .x for the x position. And remember, if I go back to our scene view here, facing the direction we're facing right now, x is left and right, y is up and down, and z, if I can rotate here by holding down right click and rotate around, and I can see z is in the direction away from the camera right now. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to every frame I want to make sure that the camera is a certain distance away from the ball. Okay, and I have it kind of set here to start with in kind of the position I want it. I want to be about this far away from the ball. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the transform property of my camera. And looks like I may have moved it just slightly. I have this set at 0 and y at 5 and z looks like at negative 14. Was it negative 14.5? Okay. And so this is just, you know, I just moved the camera around until it seemed like it was in about the right spot. And I can always change this later if I want to. There's my, there's my position, 0, 5, negative 14.5. Now let's look at the position of my ball, because I want the camera to always be the same distance away from the ball. Okay, now see the position of the ball is 0.50, where I have it starting. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that, okay, if the camera starts at position 0 in X direction, and the ball starts in position 0, okay, they're the same. So I want the X position to always be the same for the camera and the ball. So that's why I did transform.position.x. This is the cameras, because this script is going to be on the camera. So this transform.position.x sets the camera's position. And look at what I'm doing over here. Okay, player.transform.position.x. Now, what is player? Player is a public variable of type GameObject. Okay, this is the first time I think we've seen GameObject used as a type. We've seen variables that are integers. Maybe not in Unity, but in Scratch or other languages, you've seen variables that are strings or decimal numbers, what we call floats. This is a game object. Okay, and a game object, you think of a game object as like any of these things. Like when you go to game object, add game object, and it creates something in your hierarchy. Okay, that's a game object. So remember, when we create a public variable in our Unity script, it shows up. If I select the camera here, select the camera, and I put my player camera script on the camera. Here's my variable, and what I can do is I can take any of the game objects and click and drag them over here to be the player. Okay, so I can take something. I even take the wall here, and oops, I need to have my camera selected. I can even take the wall and drag it over here so that I'm fixed at a certain position behind the wall. And if I roll the ball, my camera doesn't follow. But what I really want is I want the player to be the game object that I'm following. Okay, so I put the player there, and you'll notice that as I roll to the left and I roll to the right, the camera follows the ball back and forth. And that's because every frame I'm setting the position of the camera to the position of this variable player, which I have set to that rolling ball game object. Okay. Similar things that I'm doing for Y and Z. Okay. Except instead of matching I don't want the camera to be right on top of the ball. I want the camera to be 14.5. Remember, we looked at this. This is negative 14.5, whereas the ball starts at 0. So I want the camera to always be a distance of negative 14.5 away from the ball in the Z direction. And likewise, in the Y direction, the ball actually starts at 0.5. And I have my camera here at 5, so I want the camera to always be higher than the ball by a distance of 4.5. So every time step, I'm making sure that the camera's Y position is the player's Y position plus 4.5, and the Z position is the player's Z position minus 14.5. Okay, and so what that will do for me is, you see, as I roll forward, that Z position stays negative 14.5, so I'm still kind of far away from the ball. And then if I roll down onto this other plane here and the ball starts to roll down, you can see that the camera comes down with the ball. So I'm always just 4.5 units higher than the ball. Does that make sense? Oh, hi, Nina. Glad you could join us.
Hi, Nina. Welcome. Jacob, could you modify that script to show what it would look like if the camera were right on top of the ball? In other words, Uh-huh.
So let's say instead of adding 4.5 and negative 14.5, what if we just set the camera to be in the exact same position as the ball? And if we did that, well, it's interesting. It's sort of like a first-person view, isn't it? Which is kind of cool. The camera's at kind of a weird rotation for this. That is pretty fun, though, isn't it? We'll go back and...
What would happen, though, if, like, the ball, there were to be a wall between the camera and the ball, and then you couldn't see the ball anymore?
What would happen if there was something between the camera and the ball? In fact, it would.
That's a great question, Shirley.
It's a good question, and the answer is it would get in the way. So let's go ahead and just for demonstration purposes, we'll scale this wall. Oops. Okay, so it's in the way, and if we play, we're just going to see that wall, huh? So if we were having that problem in our level, the way we would, one way we would deal with it is by saying, well, if anything is within a certain distance of the camera, we would have a script that says, well, if anything is within a certain distance of the camera and is between the camera, and the ball, then we could make this transparent, or just make it invisible, make it disappear. So that would be one way to deal with that issue.
Another way to deal with this is to make the camera closer to the ball, maybe not right on top of the ball, but so that you might not see it for a fraction of a second, but as the ball keeps rolling.
That's another way would be to just move the camera closer to the ball so you wouldn't run into this issue as often. And yet another way would be to add some. We could add, and we won't go into these different strategies right now. This isn't time. But another strategy would be to make the camera able to move around, to pivot around the ball, so you can change the angle. A lot of sort of 3D. We played 3D adventure games on like N64. They used to do that, and they still do that on like Wii and so forth, where you're able to move the camera around and look at everything from a different angle.
Or put the camera on top.
In Super Mario 64, which I've been playing on my Prop 64 emulator on my computer,
yep.
I've been using I've been using like the feature to rotate the camera, and it helps a lot.
Use the C buttons, the yellow C buttons on the N64 to move the camera around. Yep. And then a final strategy, especially for simple games, is just to design your level so that's not a big issue. Okay, so what we're going to do really quickly now is we'll just give you guys a couple minutes to get this camera working on your projects. If you are able to pull up Unity, and if you have a moving ball from the last couple weeks. Okay, so Alex looks like Alex is having a little bit of trouble. Alex, would you be willing to share your screen and we can troubleshoot?
So basically, I put in the code, and I think I didn't make any errors, but this is code. I think it's right. Basically,
Okay,
when
looks good to me.
yeah. But when I started up, I positioned my camera and I made sure that the coordinates are right, and I dragged the player thing in so that it would treat the player variable as a player. When I play it, the camera doesn't work. It says that it's in the right position.
So, hold on just a second. Go ahead and go ahead and stop the game. Okay. So, on your script.
Okay, I think I put it in the wrong coordinates. It looks like it's just.
Yeah. So I think your starting your starting coordinates are not the. So notice that your starting coordinates here aren't going to impact the actual game because you're moving the camera to a certain spot.
Oh, it's Z is the problem. Z switched to 30, which I didn't see. But 21, 12.
So if you look at your camera script, yeah, you'll see you're always going to be plus 13 in the Y direction and plus 9 in the Z direction. So no matter where you start, you're going to snap to those spots.
Yeah, but I don't know why it went so far because the players in Z20. Oh, right, needs to be. Oh, I see what I did. I put plus 9 when it should have been -9. No, it didn't work. Okay, now it works.
There you go. Very cool.
Could the challenge of this be to try to get the ball to roll down without hitting a boundary, Alex? Is that what your vision is for this game?
I don't know. I thought it'd be like a coin collection thing. Like a collection thing.
Okay, cool.
Okay, great. Let's go ahead and move on to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Jacob, can you please paste the code in the chat?
Yeah, we can do that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. I'm going to go ahead and share my desktop again, and we'll get into our next topic, which is the collectible items. Okay, so for collectible items, I'm going to add a little something to the script that we have been using to control the player, and maybe I want to bring this out into a separate script eventually. But for now, I have it in the same script as my player controller. Okay, so I have a function. Excuse me. I have a function here called Ontriggerenter, and Ontriggerenter is another sort of magic function name in Unity. And what Ontriggerenter does is it will fire whenever whenever this game object, in this case we're going to put the script on our player, on the ball. So whenever the ball rolls into a trigger, this function is going to fire. Okay, so we'll see in a second how we create a trigger on a trigger in our scene. Okay, so I added this little cube, which is going to eventually be our collectible. Okay, And this cube has a box collider. And that box collider actually was, I think, was on there by default when I just did game object and create cube. And the key thing that I've done with this box collider is that I've checked the is trigger checkbox. So now that that collider is a trigger. Okay, if I didn't check that, it would just be a normal collider, and if I ran into it, I would collide with it and stop. Okay, physics would happen. I would collide with it. But since I made it a trigger, I'm not going to collide with it and stop. I'm going to fire the Ontriggerenter function in this script. When the Ontriggerenter function is called, it's called with a parameter. Unity is going to give us this this variable called other, and other is the type of other is collider. Collider, and in particular, what we're going to use in the collider object, you can look up in the right click and go to definition. We can see some of the different well, something's not working with the documentation there. I may have to look up online. 3D documentation collider. There we go. So here's the collider documentation. It tells you all about it. You can see some of the different properties here. One of the members is game object, which it says the game object this component is attached to. Okay, so this collider is really the box collider that was the trigger that we ran into. And when we say other.gameObject, okay, that's saying we want the game object. You're following the logic here. That's meaning we want the game object that this collider was attached to. Okay, so other.gameObject, when we run into the cube, okay, with that trigger, other.gameObject here in our function is going to be the cube. Okay, that cube game object. Now, what I want to do is, since I might have a few different sorts of triggers. Hold on, Peter. We'll get to you in just a second. I'm going to finish talking about this first. There might be other sorts of triggers, so I want to make sure that this particular trigger belongs to what I'm calling a pickup object or a collectible object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check if this game object has the tag pickup. And if it does, then I'm going to deactivate it so it disappears. Set active false. Okay, and then I may do some other stuff, which we'll talk about in a second. But so an important part of this is the tag. Okay, I go on my little collectible object. I want to give it a tag of pickup, and in order to do that, I'm going to you might have to say add tag. Okay, and you would type in here pickup.
Where do you add the? Wait, how do you add tag?
So the way to add a tag, you select the game object you want to add a tag to, and in the Inspector tab at the top, there's a field for tag, and it's a little drop down. And there's a few tags there already. But what we want is a tag called pickup. So we're going to go to add tag because it's not there by default. I just added it. And that brings you to the tag manager. And then there should just be a couple slots here where you can write in your own custom tags.
Okay.
Are you guys able to, let's everyone try that. Everyone try adding a tag. Is everyone able to add a tag? Why don't you guys raise your hand if you have successfully added a tag? There's a hand. There's a hand. I know Shirley's having some computer issues, so Nina, are you having trouble, or are you just not? Oh, there's a hand. Okay, great. Thank you, guys. Fantastic. Okay, so we add that tag pickup, and what that lets us do is we can check to see if the game object we're running into has the pickup tag, and I use an if statement. Okay, so if this condition is an equality, we use two equal signs. So we say if that other game object's tag is pickup, then we're going to call gameObjects.setActive, and we're going to set it to false, so it disappears. A couple other things I'm going to do here. I'm going to increment the score. I'm going to make the score go up by 1. So what does that mean? Well, I just made a public, this is just very simple. I made a public variable, which is score, and I started at 0. And so we'll see when I run the game, and I have my player selected here. I can see I have the score variable, and oops, look in the scene here, and I run into the box, and I see my score went up by 1. Okay. The other thing I'm doing, notice I have an audio.play. So that's a sound effect. Okay, so couple things I did to make the sound effect, and let's go ahead and talk about that right now. First, I have to add this line at the top of my script. And I'll paste this script in the chat box in a second for you guys. First, we have this line at the top, okay. And that's basically saying this script should throw an error if we don't have an audio source on this object. What is an audio source? An audio source is what's going to play our sound effect. So I actually, for now, I have this on my ball, on my player object, this audio source. And I have downloaded from the Unity Asset Store some different sound effects. This is a free pack of sound effects. And you can do things like change the volume, and it looks like you can change the pitch too. One thing you can do with sound effects is if your audio, you need two things in order to get a sound effect to work. You need an audio source and an audio listener. Okay, and here I have them on the same object. Just to mention another strategy for sound effects is you would put your listener on your game object, on the player rather, the player that you're controlling, but you can put audio sources elsewhere in the scene. And so if something happens in front of you, you can have the audio source in front of you. If it happens to the right, you can have the audio source to the right. And if you have stereo sound, it'll sound like that thing is happening to your right or to your left or wherever that audio source is. So it's sort of like a 3D, it's like sound in 3D sort of thing, which is pretty cool. Although for this simple little game, I'm not having any 3D, I'm not worried about having 3D sound. I'm just putting the listener and the source on the same object on our player. So the two things to get this to work, before we go to the script, is that you would go to Add Component and Audio, and add an audio listener, and you only want one audio listener in your entire scene. You can only have one audio listener in your entire scene, and in this case, I wanted it on my player object. You can have multiple audio sources. You can have audio sources all over the place if you want. But that's another thing you add by going to Add Component, Audio Source. Oops. Okay. So once you've added your audio listener and your audio source, in the script you can just simply say audio.play to play your sound effect. And that audio.play needs to be called for an object that has an audio source. So this audio source is on our ball. And since we have that audio source on our ball, we can just say audio.play, and it'll play that audio source. And so I know the sound for this isn't coming across, or at least it's coming across very faintly, usually over WebEx. But there is a little sound effect that's playing when I'm selecting that box. So let's take the Nina. You have your hand raised. Do you have a question? Or just had her hand raised. Okay. All right. Why don't we take? I'm going to go ahead and paste the script into chat for you.
Excuse me, Jacob.
Yeah, go for it.
When I tried to import the script into Mozilla, it pasted in like a straight line. It didn't have all of the like.
Oh, it didn't have the nice
Right.
indentation. Yeah, that's a difficulty. Hold on. Looks like first of all, what I just pasted into the chat was incomplete. Looks like I hit the maximum character limit. Let me try just giving you the Ontriggerenter function. So ignore that last post. There's your Ontriggerenter function.
One thing we could do, Jacob, is post your game on the wiki so that people can see your scripts from the wiki, no?
That's a good idea. Yep.
Mm.
Yep. Especially since we're getting close to having kind of a complete example.
Mm-hmm.
I think what we'd like to do for the rest of today's webcast is make sure everyone is up to speed. So we have a good amount of time here to make sure that everyone here is up to speed with, first of all, with the camera script, if some of you are still having trouble with that, and with collecting items and sound effects. If you already have these working, it would be cool to go ahead and start fleshing out a whole level. with with obstacles and collectible items and so forth. And then we'll plan on next week. Yeah, okay, I'll get to you in just a second, Peter. Next week we will put some finishing touches on the game with maybe a scoreboard, maybe a timer, splash screen at the beginning, and then a victory condition at the end. So we'll run into a different trigger that will say that will have a message pop up that says you win.
Fantastic, fantastic.
So we'll do all that stuff, we call it a GUI or GUI stuff next week.
Great. Jacob, I'm going to turn off the recording unless there are any other questions. I know you want to go pass the ball to each one, but I think I'll cut off the recording now unless there's anything else you think we should add for David and Travis who missed this. Sounds good to me, though. Sounds like that they can pick up by just following the archive.
Okay. Peter, are you ready to share your desktop?
Yep.
Okay. There's the ball.
Okay, here we go. So when I push play.
Hold on just a second. We're not able to see. I'm not able to see your screen.
Or not?
Nope. Is that just me? Is anyone else able to see Peter's? Oh, there it goes. There